Well, today on Behind the Wheelhouse, we're joined by Paul Tonsager. Did I say that right?
Close enough.
A longtime transportation leader with decades of experience in rail and supply chain operation. He now serves as a strategic advisor to GenLogs, a company that uses real-world truck movement data and AI to help brokers, carriers, and insurers verify fleets and reduce fraud. Paul brings a practical, big picture view on how better visibility and smarter data are changing the trucking industry. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Good to see both of you. Glad to be here.
So let's get into this a little bit. GenLogs caught my eye. Ready App is doing a lot of the same things when it comes to verification, except you're on the truck side, we're on the driver side. GenLogs is a system quietly collecting trillions of data points from millions of satellites and roadside sensors across America. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I got involved with them a couple of maybe 2 years ago through a venture capital group that I'm participated. I'm a very small participant in it. I don't know if you've seen Ryan Joyce or not, the founder, one of the founders. He's an incredibly charismatic guy, and I think that's
Mhm.
helped a lot of this too. But they all came from the intelligence field, didn't know a lot about trucking. They served our country in many different ways over in the Middle East. In fact, I think they all speak Arabic. So
Oh,
their
wow.
whole career has been, how do I find stuff? Not just find stuff, but how do I make it actionable for the people, for my bosses or the public to use? And they came on GenLogs and said, we were just talking, they just went to Series B, I think $60 million in about a 2 year time period.
That's
So it's
correct.
been fun for me to kind of watch this incredible growth that he and his team have put together. But the interesting thing is, certainly they've got cameras that they've built out and certainly have them in key positions around the United States, major trucking routes.
Yeah, so these are surveillance cameras, just kind of watching everything. How do you pick out commercial vehicles versus private?
Yeah, I am not a technical person, but I know that they have built these cameras out. I think there's like three different cameras, and with the technology, they're able to look at license plate and chassis numbers and semi numbers. And I mean,
Wow.
if you go on on their site, I mean, they've got cameras set up where you can read the name of the trucker and all of that. And I think the other piece of this is they use whatever kind of public data they can get from DOTs, and they mine data wherever they can get it, to make what they have more robust for customers.
Okay. So with all that being said, what is a customer they're trying to go after with that information?
Yeah, I think part of this is their strategy has changed since they got into this. But I will tell you that certainly the insurance business has become a very big
Mm.
business for them because of their background of service. They work quite a bit with local law enforcement, so
Oh,
they've been
wow.
able to solve quite a few crimes using
Nice.
this technology. And I think that when they're dealing with police departments, and the information's free for them. I mean, they'll work with them. Again, it's a public service that they do, but it's also brokers. Certainly with all the theft and who's got the licensing and all of that. Some of their biggest customers are some of the biggest brokers out there. I think Amazon just signed a contract with them. So those are really the major areas that they're going after right now. With my background in railroad, the thing that interests me the most was looking at how you can take trucks off the road and do intermodal and look at
Mhm.
the pairs and things like that. But it's a big jump to be able to do that, and so much of it's based on pricing. It's not even based on the information that you have.
Let's take a step back for a second. Can we get a little bit of information about your background,
Sure.
where
Sure.
you gained your expertise, your knowledge, and maybe where you even grew up and how you got into this role with GenLogs?
I am a third generation railroader. My grandfather was a superintendent on the railroad in Elko, Minnesota. And then my dad went into the railroad business, and I started with Maersk Line in the steamship business. But then I went to work for a company called the Illinois Central Railroad. Certainly, if you know anything about railroads lately, what they're doing, there was a gentleman named Hunter Harrison who was kind of the Steve Jobs of the railroad business. He ended up being CEO of about, there's 6 railroads, I think 3 of them before he passed away. And I had the opportunity to work in his organization. We were purchased by the Canadian National Railroad, and I did mostly on the intermodal side, international. Moved to China for 5 years, 2004 to 2009. And a lot of that had to do with how the Chinese are buying Canadian and US products, mostly commodities. A lot of it back then was bulk shipping. So you didn't even have, containerization as much as you do today. I came back, ran our CN's non-rail businesses, all the warehousing, the trucking part of the business, the marine side of the business. So it's kind of one of these things where we don't know what to do with it, so we'll give it to Paul. I don't know if that was a compliment or not, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Then I went to work for a short line railroad here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I grew up, as chief commercial officer. And my last really full-time job was head of procurement for North America for Maersk. So I had all the trucking, all the rail, all the chassis contracts, real estate, a couple of other things. And then I've been consulting, and that's kind of how I got into this technology side of the business where, 2 years ago, nobody was even talking about AI.
Especially in trucking.
Yeah.
Technology and
Nobody.
trucking don't go together.
No, nobody has, and, of course, everybody talked about, because from a railroad perspective, they have always been worried about autonomy with trucks. Like, what is that going to do to the rail business from an intermodal perspective? I always think that's such a legal deal that in my lifetime, I don't think you're going to see as much of it, that it's going to make a huge difference. So just over the last year, AI seems to be that thing that pops up. I was at Manifest, the big tech conference in Las Vegas last week.
Yeah, right. How was that?
Hey, it's in Vegas.
What
happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You don't even know.
So for me, my next conference is in Long Beach, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do that, but it was good. I think the interesting thing is 85% of the people that are showing on that floor probably won't be there in 18 months, trying to get funding and doing all the things that they do. For me, being a bit of a novice, my question is, Ari, how do you distinguish yourself? So many visibility tools, so much optimization, API, EDI, all of these things. How do you distinguish yourself? Because having ran a procurement organization, where typically you have to go through that a bit, you need to have something that differentiates you from the other thousands of people that knock on the door and say, hey, I got great technology. So it was good. I mean, 7,000 people were there. Wow. So it goes to show that there's tons of interest in this. I'm just always a little skeptical that everybody knows what they want out of it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you had a lot of what a guy I used to work for used to call looky-loos, and just kind of looking around and seeing what it was all about. But certainly a lot of different companies showing.
Where do you feel technology is right now in transportation? My opinion is that we're, at least 10 years behind when comparing ourselves to other industries. What's your stance on that?
I agree with you. I read an article in Substack called Signals and Switches every couple of weeks. In fact, in the one that was today was EDI and API, the dumb question I asked about it, because I'm like, so I've heard so much about EDI. I knew about EDI from my past. What does API have to do with this? And I got a really good explanation of what all of that means to what's happening from a technology perspective today. I think one of the biggest challenges is, railroad business is an old-time business. Trucking business is an old-time business. The steamship business, forwarders, warehousing, these businesses have been going on for 100 years. and their paperwork's 100 years old, their data's 100 years old, their TMS systems are 50 years old. And I also think that what are customers willing to pay, right? So if you're in a lower margin business or a really cyclical business like trucking, how much money are you going to put into all of this? When times are good, people say, oh, I'll buy it or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're going to come and say, what's your rate per mile or how does this work? And how much of that data will get you a bit of a margin, or how much of that data will cut your costs?
Right.
And I think people are trying to figure that out. Anytime I sit down and talk with people like this, they're always like, want to boil the ocean with it. And the reality is, if you want success with it, you find the one point in your business. It could be accruals, it could be taxes, it could be driver hours or whatever. And you focus it in on that one thing, let everybody kind of learn it. And then you move on to the next problem, because you're going to keep finding the problems. But like I said, everybody looks at this now and I want to boil the ocean. It's going to do everything for me. And that's not the case.
Right.
Well, I want to go back to what you were saying a few minutes ago. You said it was over international. It was in China for a while. I actually lived in China for a while.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was in Guangzhou, and I traveled all over. I had a company.
Did they
I worked with.
understand you?
The little girl that I paid to walk with me everywhere did.
I always say Justin is our own tow mater.
That's it.
I think, but he arrived over there before cars came out. So,
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
it
oh
was
yeah.
it was a great experience, and yeah, I was the odd person there for sure, because I went to places that Americans had never been to. But even back then, 20 something years ago, we was talking about technology. They were already so far ahead of us technology wise. And I don't think people understand that. I mean, I remember being in China 20 years ago and I could be on my cell phone talking in the elevator. I still can't do that here in the States. And so, with that, I would like to get your opinion on that, with the way technology is. And then, two, another part, you were in intermodal and stuff. And I know this is kind of a little bit off the subject of what the conversation was going to be about, but we have so many drivers that are intermodal. It's the greatest thing ever because you can be home daily, but with
Yeah.
all the issues at the ports, like I live near Memphis port, it might be the worst rail port in the United States. I mean, it's always backed up, cranes are down. What have you seen changes on that side of the industry in the last, say, 10 years or so?
I think part of it is they went from rotary phones to cell phones. I mean, they had a step function. I mean, they went from the Cultural Revolution and the 70s and 80s to, okay, what are we going to do here? And then they accelerated past us without taking some steps in between. And I think that was part of it. The problem for me always was just so much, it was so expensive. I mean, we had, like, for data, we had to do like the internet. Remember, you had to plug it in the back of your computer. And I was there for a month and my boss calls me up and he said, you spent $5,000 on that data plan. I said, because it's taken me forever to download. And I also think because they're communist, they can also dictate how everything's going to be. There's not different
right.
companies. There's not people fighting. There's all this. We as a country, this is what we're going to do. From a rail perspective, I don't know if things have changed in the last 10 years. It's interesting because, you go to, say, Chicago or Memphis, truckers will have favorite terminals they'll go to because it's either quicker, they treat them better, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things that railroads need to do a better job of, is looking at truckers as partners. Because remember, just a piece of the supply chain, right? We shouldn't be separate. We got to help those who are trying to help our customers. And I think it's very up and down and depends on what railroad and what terminal and who's the terminal manager and all of that. But I do know, like in Chicago, that because truckers won't go to certain terminals, or they'll charge more to go to certain terminals because their wait time is 3 hours, that has a real impact. So if you feel like you're not, and I don't, and because everybody's somewhat independent, especially in that part of it, but everybody started saying we're going to charge you more to go to certain parts of Chicago because and guess what? customers like, I'm not paying you more, I'm going to go somewhere else.
Well, I think you make a good point too. Everybody in this industry needs to look at a truck driver as a partner. And
Yes.
no aspect of this industry does. They're just I, I don't even know what the nice way of putting it. They get the bottom of your shoe a lot of times. It's a shame that it gets that way in a lot of, and you're right, and that happens with all. There's a lot of them that don't want to work with certain brokers that just stay completely away, or to a certain. They don't want to go to a certain area or city. Just in regular trucking, just like in the intermodal. Now I know, like here in Memphis, they just built this new, it's almost like a city inside, right outside of Memphis. I'm not even sure. I don't know which company it was. I've never personally been in it, but I know people that go in and out. And I don't know if that maybe is the future of somehow, because they've gotten out of like inner Memphis to where the rail system was. They've kind of made them stop out way out in the suburbs and drop everything there just to, of course, be in a better area, because most railroad yards are not in good areas. Like from Memphis, especially, I mean, the crime is astronomical, and I think that's helped Memphis a lot. Now they still have issues with chassis. If you're not in there by 9 a.m., you're not getting a chassis. I mean, that's just the way it
Well,
is.
and I got to tell you, that ticks me off. So, and I'll tell you why, because in Canada, we're the only country in the world that the trucker doesn't own the chassis. Maybe you don't want that cost, the capital expense, or the maintenance, but the reality is you're not waiting. And
Right,
we've got these pools set up,
100%.
especially on an intermodal from an intermodal perspective, and you don't know if you're going to get a bad order. You don't know if there's going to be one. It complicates things. I don't ever see it changing because the people who own these chassis are making a lot of money off of them and they don't have an incentive to change. But use old Bill Clinton, I feel their pain because it's even at the warehouses, right? I mean, you got to sit and wait. You don't know if the bay, you're going to get the bay. So that whole interconnection from the rail yard till you're going to finally get there, you don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, let's talk about GenLogs a little bit. You're all about data. You're all about visibility, giving your clients visibility. So go into GenLogs and what you guys have to offer.
I've been around this for a long time. And the great thing about technology and the great thing about GenLogs is there's a lot of transparency about what's happening, right? I'm not into the trucking business day to day, but I do know certainly from the theft and everybody's trying to figure carrier assurance and all these companies are trying to figure out a way to make the trucking experience a little bit better. And certainly GenLogs and look, they are, a year and a half ago, they were getting data, they were getting data, they were getting data. How good was it? It was good, but today, because they've been doing, millions and billions of dollars of data they're getting every day, and they're using AI to curate it and to make sure it's data that you can give to customers. I mean, you go and you type in OD pairs, you type in the shipper, they're doing some things with railroads, and you come up with a pretty good pattern on, where trucks are moving in the US.
Yeah. How long does it take to get that meaningful movement pattern from a
I mean,
carrier?
I don't know if I can answer that. What I would say is just from my own experience and kind of watching it, they were getting really good directional data 6 months in. We know that this many trucks is going to this customer, but it was getting to, how many exact trucks.
First, for our listeners, let's break it down in a little simpler terms. So what
Sure.
you're doing is you're going out and finding the way that the carriers move, because what's happening is there's so much fraud, or there's so much just embellishment on what these carriers say they do. So these customers will go and hire these carriers and say they can run from point A to point B very easily, and then that carrier gets that business and they can't follow through with it.
That's exactly right. And I think what this gives them is real data. I mean, a lot of it used to be a guess, or you weren't real sure. But now, especially if you're going to a court of law, or you start getting to legal issues, or those types of things, they've got really good information that helps you.
Yeah, well, these logistics planners are just trusting they receive a million phone calls a week from carriers wanting their business. They're going basically, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're going to the cutest girl on the phone, you know? I
Mhm.
mean, that's what they're doing, and they're trusting what they had, that they can offer what they had to say.
And they're always going to make it a little bit sound a little bit better than what it is too to get the business or to win over a lane. They're going to embellish it by far.
Both of you do this every day. I mean, this is your life being in the middle of this trucking business.
We used to.
Yeah,
Well,
from the
but
tech
you talk
side.
about it.
We
But
do
you
talk
talk
about
about
it.
it. You talk about
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
So, and being somebody a bit that's been on the outside of it, I know from a rail perspective, you just talked about Memphis, all the theft, all that's going on there that really, I mean, I don't know if they've gotten a handle on it yet.
No, it is better from when the National Guard got there, but it's still a long way to get safe. It might not ever fix it, but it's not safe to be in Memphis in certain parts. And it wasn't like that 10 years ago.
I started with Illinois Central Railroad, so I used to go down to Memphis a lot early in my career. It wasn't a dangerous place.
Right.
So, how are you seeing it? The fake truckers and the fake documentation and the numbers and all of
Yeah,
that.
so we're addressing that on the Ready App side. So it's no secret. Justin and I are heavily involved with Ready App. What we're focused more on is driver data and independent driver verification. So right now, if you think about it in the trucking world, let's just, relate it to airlines. So you have United Airlines, the carriers being checked, right? And that's United. The passengers being checked, and that's being vetted. That's your cargo. Maybe not even really as much as we'd like to see it, but we're trusting United to put the best drivers in the seat, and no one's actually verifying who those drivers are for each and every load. So what happens is you have, you know, John booked a load and Justin's supposed to be that driver, and then Justin rebooks that load for Paul, and Paul
Yeah.
rebooks that load for Cindy. Cindy shows up at the receiver, and actually Jody has taken that shipment already and it's already gone. So no one is independently verifying that driver. No one's making sure that that driver has the documents, the certifications to even haul that load, such as hazmat. What our technology does is basically builds that driver a passport, so to speak. So then that passport can be shared. Once they take 25 minutes to build that passport, it's done. They don't have to share all the information. They can share a certain amount of information and it's shared to that broker. That broker is then able to say, okay, this share that information with the shipper. They're also able to verify with the carrier who that driver says that they run for that they're related, right? And it can all be done within a matter of seconds, if minutes at the very most.
So this blows me away that this hasn't been done before.
Exactly. We have zero
Exactly.
competition. It's really shocking.
It
Yeah.
is.
So what's happening right now is there's a lot of companies out there verifying carriers and their safety records. And then there are even these boards that are wrecking carriers' lives because of one bad egg, one bad driver. So the other drivers, the other 150, 350, 5,000 drivers that are within that carrier, they're affected by what one driver did. It's just bad reporting. And again, you're just checking carrier safety standards. You're not checking what that driver actually did. And what we're able to start doing from this is gather this data and start building kind of like a credit report for these drivers to show brokers what kind of quality drivers. So if you have a driver that you can take, and I didn't mean to get into this much about Ready App, it's supposed to be about GenLogs, but if you have a driver who's 80 out of 100 and another driver who's 60 out of 100, you can make a decision not solely based on rate.
It helps the owner operator. No one wants to help the owner operator or just a regular truck driver. And with Ready App, we're able to, if the old saying is the person that works the hardest, does the best job should be rewarded. And we trying to help with that, but we take it even a step further. So many times a driver shows up at the customer. The customer don't even know who that person is. They're representing their brand when they pick it up to deliver to their customer. In my opinion, the customer has the right to know if John Smith is the driver, who's on the side of his truck. So when he shows up, Yep, it all matches. You look the part, you're doing what you're supposed to. You make a good delivery, then everybody's happy, and it's down like because there's so many non-documented drivers. There's, drivers who don't care or are not very good on safety, and the good ones should be able to rise above.
And I think this is with the GenLogs and all, is that like with the ELP and with the time of service and insurance and all of these other things that you would think would become a bit of a moat or a bit of some security for customers. Are they not?
If an insurance company can have insights into those drivers and see their history in real time, they can make a much more informed underwriting decision. And also, it's about chasing documents, right? Right now, there is no centralized system.
AI, man.
Yeah, there's no centralized system to upload these documents. So, with the AI that we're talking about implementing, the AI will be able to read that information right off the document and
Yeah,
give
yeah,
it
yeah.
in the form that the insurers want, that the brokers want, that the shippers want. It'll be able to automatically, transition that data into whatever way they need to view it.
Well, I know when I was running procurement at Maersk, unless you had $1 million minimum of insurance, we couldn't do business with you. That was just our
Right.
our corporate thing.
Yeah.
And so that knocks a lot of people out of the box, right?
Right.
Of even being able to deal with Maersk. And when you just said that about the insurance companies, it's like if I don't get hit by a flood or something, hopefully my insurance rates are going down. I don't know if that's the same thing with truckers or not.
It's unfairly based on carriers, and it's because I think that these insurers do not have the proper data in front of them. Then that leads into, application fatigue when drivers are trying to find new jobs. They're filling out lengthy applications. It shouldn't be like that. Drivers should be able to enter in their information one time. And so many different industries are like that. But application fatigue is real, and it's especially real with truck drivers. So drivers are going with the path of least resistance, which is usually the worst carrier.
Yep.
And, and then they don't end up getting paid for 3 weeks, and then they're on to the next carrier. So what we're all about, and I'm sure what GenLogs is about building a community. Everything's siloed off. It's really just bringing it together.
One of the interesting things about with GenLogs was, they focused in on, because they're all from Virginia, they focused in on that area. Then they focused in on around LA, some of the big areas. So you could even see regionally and geographically how there were problems, or that each area was a bit different. Now they've got 50 state coverage with their sensors and their data. So I mean, if you want to find out, who the trucker is for Walmart from one location to another, you can go into their system, and chances are they'll be able to pull up either a real-time picture of who's going in and out of that facility, or give you an
Wow.
idea of who that trucker is. So I
Yeah.
mean, they've gotten to be pretty sophisticated. And again, I think, they started with like 4 people. Now they're, I think, up to 70 or 80.
So what surprised you most once you started seeing, large scale fleet movement data?
Well, for me, I again, as a bit of a railroader, truck diversion for railroads is like nirvana. We've talked about it for 40 years and really have not moved the needle on it. But I would get data early in my career, and it was big pieces of paper, Hoover and Reeby data that basically just said, we think this company's doing trucks. And I would go knock on doors. Hey, you got
Hmm.
freight for me? You trucking? That was how. In fact, it was Memphis. I'd walk around. I'd knock on doors in Memphis. You got freight? How do I put it in intermodal cans and all this kind of stuff? Today, with what GenLogs has and some of the other tools that are out there, from a sales perspective, you don't have to do that anymore. You can just go in and type in and go, oh, they're moving 10 trucks a week to this facility. And then with DAT and all the pricing, I mean, there's transparency and everything. I could tell exactly what the rate is. In fact, I think GenLogs has that capability with DAT built into their system now. So from a sales perspective, it's become, actually, I'm jealous. I kind of like knocking on doors in Memphis. Now I can just sit in front of my computer and figure out what I need to do. So that is really what's blowing me away. But on the flip side, what's blowing me away is what you guys have been talking about, that there's all this data out there for an industry that's as large as it is,
Yeah.
that affects so many people. And there's not a central repository, or, from privacy reasons, people probably don't want that, but there's not a means to be able to collect this data a little bit more. Because to be honest with you, if you had that repository on drivers, or you had some like TSA pre type thing, you might not need somebody like GenLogs as much,
Well,
because you're already kind of really cutting it out from the very beginning. Because if you don't have a driver, you ain't moving the truck.
yeah, that's right. That's what we're building it ready at.
It's funny because at the end of the journey, you don't know what you really have. I mean, you've got really, like, you guys with this, you have strong opinions on where you think this thing's going to be. But the
Right.
reality is, when you're pulling back the onion and you're looking at other opportunities, this might not be exactly what you're going to have 2 or 3 years from now, that you've monetized and made $1 billion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, like Ready
Right.
App started as an ATS platform solely.
Yeah.
And it's evolved into, like, we were speaking with some brokerages. I've got family with some of the largest brokers in the country, and we're talking about driver identification, and it doesn't exist. We also want to do this to make sure it's easy on the drivers, where, when a DOT officer pulls over a driver, a lot of times the reason why they're getting a ticket, it was just because of the attitude and them having to dig through paperwork in their truck. They can't find it. They can't find their medical card. They can't find their social. They can't find their CDL. It's not where they once had it, and everything's moving around in that cab. So, will there be a point where movement intelligence, like what you guys are doing with Gen Logs and
Yeah.
tracking movement, will there be a point that that becomes mandatory?
It all becomes legal issues,
Yeah.
because so much of even what GenLogs had, I mean, everything that they've got is either on a public road, their cameras everything's public. And that's intentional, because they've gone through all the privacy laws, they got all these things. That will be the bugger, will be the privacy side of it. You can pick up movement on I-95 and state roads and things like that. But, is there a break between a state road and a local road that you might not be able to go on because they have different privacy issues? Especially for somebody like GenLogs, you only want to deal with public data, because getting into any areas that you have that privacy issue just becomes so problematic.
Going back to the crime, you look at other countries who have face recognition all through the cities and easily are helped to solve a crime, or to find suspects in a crime, or a car leaving with a tag. Is at some point we just have to give that up as a liberty of some privacy. I mean, we don't have a lot of privacy now, more than we did 20 years ago, yes. But I
I
mean,
mean, the
Zero, zero,
yeah.
zero
Yeah, I
privacy.
mean, do we not just give that up now,
I
and
mean,
for
you
the
guys just
good?
found a minor, correct? You guys just found a minor in a truck. Did I read that
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
Like,
I mean stuff.
they've solved the murders and all. I mean, it's been,
Human
but again, it's all
trafficking.
public data.
Yeah.
Everything they
Oh,
got is
okay.
public, right? It's all off of their cameras or whatever. And part of that is because, you got to go into court. You got to, I didn't take her. Okay, well, right. So they've been really, really successful at helping to solve crimes. And again, it's all free to law enforcement. But to get back on the privacy issue, yeah, I mean, I've got a 27-year-old daughter who doesn't even know what privacy means, which I frankly think is a shame. Myself, I could get away with stupid stuff when I was in
Right.
college and all that.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be the big legal issue for the Supreme Court in the next 20 years, is what does that mean? I mean, certainly after 9/11, we all thought that too, like, what are we going to have to give up here to be safe? I think that is a TBD.
While we're talking about technology, real quick before we close out, what's your opinion on autonomous trucks and where do you think we're going with that?
Nowhere fast. And I don't mean to be flip about saying that.
I think you're
Again,
right. I agree with you.
Yeah, most
I'm
most
curious.
it gets back to the legal issues. When I was in California, I just did Waymo. I'd never done it before. It was the freakiest thing I've ever been in. I kept wanting to punch it or do whatever, but we get to the first stoplight and they had just come into that community and we went through 3 lights before it had finally learned that the light's going, we needed to take a left. Well, I live in Jacksonville, Florida, and I guarantee you the old boys down here, if that car would have sat for 3 cycles, something would have happened and it wouldn't have been good. So will it happen? Will it happen in certain segments? Will it happen between the port and an intermodal term? Yeah, I think but in New York City, around New Jersey, no way. Not in my lifetime.
Well, we don't have the infrastructure to handle it, right? What happens when that autonomous truck just stops in the middle of the road?
Well, again, who's responsible for that?
Right.
Does the New Jersey State Police come and shoot, there's nobody here. Who do I arrest? Or who do I get this thing to move? I find it to be really, really problematic in large areas. I know that I will tell you this. I know the technology's there. The technology itself is close to being able to, but I got Morgan and Morgan here and Farah, like Tampa. I got legal people all over the place. You can't tell me that Mr. Morgan is not going to be looking for the first autonomous truck.
He's waiting. He's all over it.
He is most definitely. But I think we're 20 years from having the infrastructure to even make it, especially the big trucks. Now cars maybe sooner, but I don't think we're anywhere close for just the regular automobile either.
Well, and I can tell you, if you're driving around, if you buy an F-150, you really want to have that autonomous. You want to drive it yourself,
right?
Or a sports car or something like that. So I'm pretty skeptical of that.
Well, even on our planes, I mean, how long have our planes been flying by themselves, and we still have 2 pilots in the cockpit?
And I always look up front because I want gray hair.
That's exactly
That's
right.
a very good point. I like that.
Even though it's autopilot or whatever, but I want gray hair, a bun or whatever. But
that's right.
I think when it comes to public safety, people are pretty particular about that.
I agree. Well, we appreciate you coming on. I do want to give you a quick second. If people want to find GenLogs, how do they go about finding them, and give a little pitch for GenLogs for customers who may be looking for a solution like yours?
Yeah, so it's genlogs.io. And you can look on LinkedIn or go into the Google and search it. But they are tracking in real time with cameras, the trucking industry out there. So, certainly from an insurance perspective or a broker's perspective on looking for trucks that shouldn't be there, or people with, not having the right tags and things like that. GenLogs is an incredible place to go right now.
I think it's really cool. I think it's awesome what you were doing. I really, or what you guys are doing. I appreciate you coming on the show. I think aside from even what you're doing on the freight and logistics side, helping, carriers show what they really do and to get that information out in front of their customer, technology that protects people matters, whether it's reducing fraud, stopping cargo theft, helping law enforcement recover victims.
The other piece of it is most truckers are really good. Right? I mean, they do a great job. They run a safe operation. They want to go home at night. And, the few bad apples
ruin it for
that's
everyone.
Why we're having
everybody.
That's why we're having this conversation. So hopefully technology like GenLogs and what you guys are looking to do will knock out the bad apples. So the industry people go, wow, okay, that industry's really got it together. The information's there, the technology is there to do that. It just takes the will, which I think you guys are with your Ready app are ready to go.
Well said.
Well, we sure do appreciate you coming on again, Paul. Wish you the best. We'd love to have you back on with your next venture. And everybody, we appreciate y'all coming on today.
Yeah, Paul, thank you. And if you're ever in Tampa, stop by and say hello.
I will absolutely do that. I get down there quite often. So I'll give you a ring.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming on Behind the Wheelhouse.
Thank you.